Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel, History Chronicles. As the reign of Louis XIV came to an end, the grandeur of the French monarchy remained intact. But beneath the surface, the kingdom was facing a growing storm of discontent. The centralized power and extravagant lifestyle of the monarchy had left deep scars on the French society, setting the stage for a revolution that was still decades away. In this episode, we delve into the social and economic divisions that would soon push France to the brink of chaos. France in the late 17th and early 18th centuries was a land of stark contrasts. On one side, the nobility and the clergy lived lives of privilege and luxury, enjoying vast estates, tax exemptions, and influence over the monarchy. On the other, the common people, peasants, urban workers, and the emerging bourgeoisie struggled under the weight of taxes, poverty, and an increasingly rigid social hierarchy. The French society was divided into three estates. The first estate consisted of the clergy, who, despite being a small percentage of the population, wielded enormous power. They owned about 10% of the land in France and were exempt from most taxes. The church collected tithes from the people and had significant influence over education and moral guidance. Yet not all clergy lived in luxury. The higher clergy, bishops and abbots, enjoyed wealth and comfort, while the lower clergy, such as parish priests, often lived in conditions not much better than those of their parishioners. The second estate was the nobility. They owned about 25% of the land and, like the clergy, were largely exempt from taxes. The nobility held key positions in the government, military, and judiciary, and they had privileges that were out of reach for the rest of the population. However, the nobility itself was divided. The higher nobility, or nobles of the sword, were descendants of medieval knights and had long-standing titles. The lower nobility, or nobles of the robe, were often those who had purchased their titles or had risen to nobility through service to the king. Despite these internal divisions, the nobility was united in its desire to maintain its privileges and resist any changes that might threaten its status. The third estate, which made up about 98% of the population, included everyone else: peasants, urban workers, and the bourgeoisie. The peasants were the largest group within the third estate, and they bore the brunt of taxation. They paid the taille, a direct land tax, as well as numerous other feudal dues to their lords. In addition, they were required to provide labor on roads and other public works, known as the corvée, without any compensation. The burden of these obligations, combined with poor harvests and rising prices, led to widespread hardship among the peasantry. In the cities, the situation was no better. Urban workers, including artisans and laborers, faced low wages and rising costs of living. The rapid population growth in the cities, particularly Paris, led to overcrowding, unemployment, and poor living conditions. The urban poor were often at the mercy of economic fluctuations, and their discontent would later play a significant role in the revolutionary movement. Amidst this bleak landscape, the bourgeoisie, or the middle class, began to rise. The bourgeoisie was made up of merchants, lawyers, doctors, and other professionals who had become increasingly wealthy and influential. They resented the privileges of the nobility and the clergy and were frustrated by their exclusion from political power. Many in the bourgeoisie were educated and influenced by Enlightenment ideas, which championed reason, equality, and individual rights. They were eager for reform and would eventually become the leaders of the revolution. As the gap between the privileged classes and the third estate widened, so too did the sense of injustice. The monarchy's heavy taxation, coupled with the economic inequality and social divisions, created an environment ripe for unrest. The peasants were tired of their endless toil with little reward. The urban workers faced starvation and homelessness. The bourgeoisie, despite their wealth, were denied the political power they believed they deserved. By the time Louis XIV's successor, Louis XVI, took the throne, the financial situation in France had worsened. The wars of Louis XIV had drained the treasury, and the cost of maintaining the opulent court at Versailles continued to mount. Louis XIV's reign was marked by further financial mismanagement and increasing debt. The king's attempts at reform were met with resistance from the nobility and the clergy, who were unwilling to relinquish their privileges. The tension between the estates was not just about economics, it was also about power and identity. The nobility and clergy viewed themselves as the protectors of tradition and the rightful rulers of the land. They saw the Third Estate as subjects rather than citizens, people whose role was to support the higher estates rather than to participate in governance. This paternalistic attitude only deepened the resentment among the common people. In the countryside, peasants began to resist feudal obligations more openly. There were incidents of peasants refusing to pay taxes or to perform the corvée. In the cities, the bourgeoisie grew bolder in their demands for political representation and reform. Pamphlets and essays criticizing the monarchy and the privileges of the higher estates circulated widely, often in secret, as censorship laws were strict. As we look back on these social and economic divisions, it becomes clear that the French society was a powder keg waiting for a spark. The inequality, the burden of taxation, and the rigid class system created a society on the brink of revolution. The monarchy, the nobility, and the clergy were blind to the growing anger among the Third Estate, and this blindness would soon lead to their downfall. The roots of the French Revolution were planted deep within the social fabric of France. The discontent that had been growing for decades would soon erupt into a full-scale revolution that would sweep away the old order and forever change the course of history. In our next episode, we will delve into the economic crisis of 1788, where financial chaos would bring these tensions to a boiling point, setting the stage for the storm that was to come. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through the French Revolution. Thank you for joining us on History Chronicles. See you in the next episode.